better crack on.
Good.
Welcome to the second part of part 2 of this week's extravaganza, based on in the timing of JP Morgan, and we've had fabulous time on cell and gene therapy, and now it's a chance to have another fabulous time with my dear friend Max Herrmann, who I can see. Max, you're probably just under the bridge over there, and normally you and I, because Max is my great buddy for traveling around JP Morgan, normally we're wandering around, aren't we, trying to find a coffee bar and then trying to find a party or a get together, and you know, we pick up a lot of highlights as we're wandering around, and we discuss them later as we meet in the bar. I mean, so maybe I could start by, Max, have you got anything that you see that is hot in JP Morgan? Have you picked things up, or is it a case of we're all remote and we can't quite find out what's going on?
Well, it's definitely very different from normal JP Morgans, virtual, because you don't get the opportunity to talk to people in the street and see how they're, you know, how's your JP Morgan going, and get the feedback from there. And obviously JP Morgan has expanded to way beyond the Union Square event itself into multiple other events going on at the same time, and evening parties and stuff like that. So it is very different, and finding out what's going on is more about what a company's doing than it is about the back chat in the cafes and stuff. So I would say there is different feelings from different people, and it depends what perspective you have. So I spoke to some of the guys who organize peripheral events, so not the JP Morgan event, but others around that, and they've said, because you've had a lot of webinars and Zoom meetings, it's been really easy to do Zoom meetings without traveling. There's been a high proportion of meetings happening like that. So they said that their number of meetings were down. They were about 80% of what they would normally be. So people like, you know, the Trout Group and Lifestyle Advisors have found it less well attended in terms of number of meetings. But then I talked to our banker at Stifel today, and he was absolutely full of enthusiasm for kind of the best JP Morgan ever from his perspective, in terms of there's people wanting to do things. Basically, people want to. There's a real positive can-do attitude from both investors and from companies, and certainly in terms of fundraising, there is a lot of money out there, and we've seen already San Biotech on the road. They raised $700 million privately last year. They're now looking to raise, seems like a trivial amount now, $150 million in the private, sorry, in the public markets. Just announced their plan.
What's their technology, Max? What is that? What are they?
So where is San Bio? I had actually noted that, because I don't know them myself. It's a cell and gene therapy company spun out of Harvard Tech, so very, very appropriate for the group today.
When you talk to your banker, did he get a sense? Is it because, I mean, it's like a super bubble that is now open, or you know, the world is open now? What was his?
Well, we saw this last year, that for life sciences, I think what happened last year was life sciences has come very much, well, you know, into vogue, and fundraising. You know, there's a lot of liquidity around, a lot of capital around, partly due to quantitative easing. I think that's flowing through into, you know, bond rates, and bonds are rates are very low, so they're very unattractive. So people are putting money into equity. That's why we've seen the equity markets really strong. When the equity markets are really strong, people are looking at new opportunities, new ideas, and because of COVID, and who's addressing COVID? Well, it's healthcare. Healthcare is seen as the place to be, there's a huge amount of money raised last year, and I'm sure this year will start the same as we see with San Biotech kicking off early on. I think we'll see. Usually there's a time window between now and mid-February where you can see biotech IPOs, and then you have to sort of wait another few weeks until the flurry start again for regulatory reasons. There's this sort of a period in end of February, early March, where people are getting their 2020 numbers out there, and once they've got those, they can then start again. So a lot going on. What he also said was that investors are struggling to deploy capital. So what you've got here is a lot of people looking to raise money and a lot of people looking to invest money, and it's a perfect scenario for fundraising.
But we've heard this before, and it's always that there are those who are positioned for the perfect raise, and then there are those who still are scuffing around at the bottom of the sandpit. I mean, is this there's going to be more big, are we going to see bigger companies in America? Are we going to see big investment, great big companies, life science companies in the US with lots of cash? New pharma companies,
I mean,
really.
Yeah, obviously San Biotech it clearly shows a couple of things. It shows firstly that cell and gene therapy is very much in the mainstream from an investor's perspective, and then secondly, with the $700 million raise, it shows you that investors are prepared if the technology is exciting and the management has got strong credibility. I think it's the ex CFO of Juno, I think it is, who's the CEO there. He's he's got obviously strong credibility, and then people are prepared to back with a very significant amount of money. So that's not changed. I think Moderna was pretty much that when it first came into fruition, and I think it took a few years, but didn't BioNTech do quite a few very big raises in the private markets before it did its IPO? So don't know if it's a change, but it's certainly a phenomenon in the US.
So was there anything else that was hot in your conversation?
Well, that's the themes that came out from the banker. Other themes that I'd talk about is clearly M&A has been weak. I think Graham, you mentioned it in your invitation to me that, or in general, that I was bound to mention the Kymab deal, Sanofi 1.1 billion. I think that's noticeable, isn't it? That is the biggest deal we've seen. So that tells us something, that actually perhaps COVID has meant M&A is more challenging. I definitely have heard that over the course of 2020, is that, okay, it's okay if you're going to buy a product, but if you want to buy a company and you need to know the people and you need to know, more about the nuts and bolts of a business, it's really hard to do without kicking the tires. And so those type of deals aren't happening, and that's what we're seeing now, few and far between. One area I think we did see a real hot appetite during 2020 was obviously in the antibody, again a bit like the Kymab area, but ADCs and bispecifics. So really big deal with Immunomedics, and also big Velbios with the acquisition from Merck of that. So you've seen that area being really hot. So I think M&A is more muted than pure equity raising, as partly because of COVID.
I think I'm going to, because of time, I'm going to start bringing Mike and Sue in to discuss as well.
Let me just say one more thing, because there's a bit of a theme, and this is my main theme, which hit off with Monday, and I think BioNTech and Moderna also bring this theme in, is that we have a new modality, which is RNA, and RNA has now come into full vogue. It's either the siRNAs through Alnylam, or you have, as I say, the Moderna and the BioNTech delivering mRNAs, but mRNA as a therapeutic modality is now a next key modality. You had small molecules, you had biologicals, you then had antibodies, now you've got RNA therapeutics. So that's a big theme. You saw Alnylam on the Monday ahead of the, well, pretty much ahead of the start of JP Morgan announce they've got 4 therapeutics now approved. They're planning over the next 5 years to bring 2 more therapeutics through to market. So they'll have 6 by the end of, by 2025, with a massive pipeline of products with 10 late stage assets by 2025. So that's the big change.
Fantastic, Max. Absolutely fantastic. How life changes.
Yes, I know.
How life
Tony and I have quite a lot of affinity for RNA.
Yeah, how life changes with fashion. Now, and bringing in Mike. Thanks, Max. You're a great man. I mean, Mike and Sue. Welcome to Mike and Sue. I think most of you know Mike and Sue. I mean, just bringing you in with our dear friend Max. What Mike, from your perspective, picking up on the gossip from JP Morgan, anything to add?
Well, you know, to point out, as Max said, that JPM normally is the time when people are sort of saving up their big announcements. So, you know, in recent years, we wake up on the Monday morning and find out that, you know, Bristol Myers is going to spend $73 billion on Celgene. This week, it's been pretty quiet. I mean, the biggest deals, the Kymab deal was obviously with Sanofi, and the CEO of Sanofi has sort of said that, you know, they're looking to seek, you know, more partnerships to, you know, access gene therapy tools and cell-based therapies. So it kind of ties in very nicely with the conversation that went on earlier. But, you know, what was interesting was that there doesn't seem to be the sort of big appetite for the mega mergers. It seems to be bolt-on. So you're Boehringer signing the deal with Anara Bio. It's worth about $1 billion. So, you know, Bristol Myers, the CEO there, basically sort of said that, you know, they're looking at mid-sized bolt-on acquisitions. Yeah, Amgen is going to use its balance sheet to become an active deal maker. So it did a deal with another British company, Evoke, not a British company, Evoke Therapeutics, $240 million. Anara Bio is the British company. The biggest deal, and it was announced kind of like on the eve of JPM, was in fact, you know, the Novartis in licensing tislelizumab from Beijing. I'm as bad at pronouncing monoclonals as Boris Johnson.
Yes.
But yeah, but that was a 650 million up front, but there's a potential of 2.2 billion. But it's an interesting sort of switch in the sort of Novartis strategy. So we got that, but then you've got someone like AbbVie who are facing a massive patent cliff with Humira going off patent in the States in 2023. And yet they're sort of saying that they're actually going to, you know, look at their pipeline essentially to grow post Humira. So they're not looking at sort of, you know, the big transformational deals. Other things, we saw Lilly put out some interesting data around Alzheimer's, so that got everybody excited about the amyloid hypothesis and questions: is this good news for Biogen or is it bad news for Biogen? Gilead, so there was a lot of news around COVID, so people were interested in what, you know, Pfizer, BioNtech was saying, what Moderna was saying. J&J provided some sort of COVID-19 vaccine updates. J&J is hoping it's going to do something soon. Gilead has basically done very, very well with remdesivir. The CEO sort of basically saying that 1 in 2 COVID-19 hospitalized patients have received remdesivir, so that's become a sort of a blockbuster for the company. And then when it comes to sort of the financing, EQRX, which is this company that's basically got a mission to develop cheaper drugs. It raised $500 million. And the one thing that was notable was that there's no consensus around drug pricing. So you've got Johnson & Johnson sort of saying that everybody, all the stakeholders have got to get involved in the discussions, whether it's it's government or it's companies or it's the healthcare providers. Ken Frazier from Merck sort of saying actually it's not that such a big deal, and yet Lilly, David Ricks from Lilly is saying it is a big deal, and in fact the industry needs to show some leadership. So I think that the problem that we have is that there's been a lot of sort of transactional activity, but I'm not really sure whether we've really sort of seen the kind of excitement and energy that people sort of absorb while they're at JPM, and then coming back and sort of hitting the ground running. That's
maybe they'll have more energy coming out because they wouldn't have traveled so much.
But I think that the sort of the potential energy that you acquire at JPM can then be translated into kinetic energy. Okay, so people have got more stamina probably over the next few weeks, but have they been inspired by that sort of accidental collision where they've had a conversation with somebody and it's just sparked?
Can I bring in Sue? I mean, Sue, I'm looking at time and I'm thinking, Sue, how do you think the image of the pharma industry has been impacted by, well, pharma and biotech and life sciences by this the year we've just had, Sue?
Well, I mean, I think the main thing is, if we can't make this the best year for making life sciences count, and the general public, whether they're just reading newspapers or investing, really appreciate the value that our industry has to add, then we don't deserve to be in our jobs. So I think there's been various barometers showing that the reputation of pharma and biotech and life sciences has gone up, and the appetite to understand a little bit behind the science has gone up. And there was a nice report from the BIA at the beginning of this week that showed in the UK where perhaps getting institutional investors into the sector has traditionally been a bit harder, that actually there's been a lot of quite substantive institutional investors, perhaps some of them generalists, coming to the sector. So I think that leaves us with two things really. I think it leaves us with, we must use that strong positive reputation and the sense that science will save us. I think everyone was just hanging on, where's the vaccines, where's the drugs, and Jeremy Farrar from the Wellcome Trust had for a while a little hashtag of science will save us. So we must use that for good, and be careful that by perhaps with all the money knocking around, we don't gobble it up and not use it wisely and disappoint whenever there's a bear market or around the corner from a bull market. So we have to really think about that. And then I think the other thing is the using all the money that's around and the positive energy, even if we didn't get it at JP Morgan, I think just generally the positive energy to really be ambitious. Because I think what COVID has shown is it's not the lack of ambition that didn't take us there. Lots of scientists have lots of innovation and lots of ambition. It was perhaps the sort of slightly dogged processes, the slow, pharma would take 2 years to chat to you about a deal, and so let's just use that ambitious energy and the money and the strong will to collaborate to really go for it, because I think that's the positive place that we're now in.
Well, I think is a fantastic way to be concluding our.
If we could just bring in Emma quickly, I just want to get some thoughts on how companies can raise their profile, you know, kind of during this virtual world that we live in. You know, Emma, do you have some thoughts on that?
Sure. I guess I want to pick up on something that Arvind said, and thanks, Graham, by the way, on something Arvind said earlier about investor presentations and the fact that, you know, you've got to give something of yourself in those presentations. And if you translate that into the kind of supply chain or the contract services within life sciences, the whole industry has been humanized by this, because first and foremost, we've had to do everything by Zoom, so we've had to work a lot harder. Secondly, actually, we're all patients because we're all going to get the COVID vaccine eventually. So I think that that's an absolute key element of this. You can't just do what you did before COVID. You need to be more human. But I think because we're all digital, there's a lot of noise. So of course, everyone's rushed to digital channels. And I think that, and I would like to say thank you for this event, because actually a lot of online events have jaded people. Like they've lacked energy and they've lacked structure. And this has been a great format. And I think that is going to be key going into this first half of this year, is really good events like this, webinars or you know, gathering people together and sharing information. Doing that well virtually will make a massive difference, I think, before we can go back to being face to face. So that's just my, you know.
Fantastic.
Lovely, that was great. Thank you.
Could I just add one thing there?
Yeah.
And really, it's a compliment to BioNTech. So I think when you look at all the noise there is, not only in the traditional media, but across Twitter and LinkedIn, and everyone using those platforms more, it's really hard to keep up. So therefore, it's really hard to stand out because there's so much going on. And a company like BioNTech that has got so much good news to talk about could have just talked about that. But one thing it did that for me stood out was it put out a thank you to the 100 or so partners, collaborators that had worked with it. And that wasn't a sort of traditional financial end of year, you know, we've done this and we've done that and we've strengthened this operation here. It was just a table and a thank you. And for me, that sort of personality and that sort of we're in it together really helps you stand out as, you know, and I would look at that and say, well, that's the company I want to do business with, because they actually say thank you for doing business with them. That, you know, so I just think everyone needs to think about that. How can you convey a personality and that sort of warmth that people want to work with you or will listen to you or read your stuff, because cutting through the noise is hard.
I think that is fantastic.
And that's actually a great little segue to thank the sponsors, because one of the reasons I've been able to provide this platform so cost effectively is that Cobra Biologics has kindly sponsored us. So a big thank you to you, Philip, and your team, and putting this together.
And Tony, it's been wonderful, really good.
And
thank you.
Graham,
could I say something?
Yeah, but just before let me just thank the speakers. I think that you've done a stellar job. Max, Sue, Mike, Emma, thanks so much. I mean, Max, I so hope we're up there walking up that up that hill next year. I mean, whether we are or not, we don't know yet, but we'll hope that. Just one last question from
Valerie.
From Valerie.
It's not a question, Tony. It's a comment, and I'm eliciting it without being called on this time, which was great. Last time I was called on. Thank you to the speakers first of all, and to Cobra for doing this, because I've learned a great deal and it's been phenomenal. But as someone who commercializes organizations, that's what I do. Commercialize life science organizations to build teams. I'm very interested in trust, because people want to do business with companies that they know, like, and trust. To Sue's point. Communication, communication information is key right now. And I don't know if you all have seen the recent, that's just emerged, the recent Edelman 2021 Trust Barometer. That's a huge compilation of media and polling. It's one of the biggest pollings. And if you take a look at it, it's very revealing, because big pharma, which has such a negative connotation from the outside world, right, has gone up, but not as much as we would like it to go up. It has certainly, business has gone up more than government. Government's trust has gone down dramatically as a result of everything that's transpired in 2020. But business has gone up because of CEOs actually stepping up and talking. And if you look at the summary of the Edelman Trust Barometer, it says that people will respond more if the CEOs start giving information. So if we start giving information out, whether it's through LinkedIn, whether it's through whatever social media, but giving information so that the public is informed. And it talks later on about certain socioeconomic groups in the United States and their hesitancy about getting the vaccine. And for example, the Black population is very hesitant about getting vaccines because of their lack of information and sometimes access to information. So the more information that our executives and especially the CEOs speaking out can give, that's what the public is hungry for, and it's raising trust in life sciences and in big pharma and in biotech. So I would urge you to take a look at the new Edelman Trust Barometer. I was stunned by some of the things that I read, but also encouraged by others. If our CEOs, and you've seen CEOs start to step forward on BLM this year and on societal issues, but informational issues about the vaccine, informational issues about new products, all of this elevates our industry in the people who for so long have not trusted the industry. In fact, in the past, I don't know if you know, but the average public thinks that 60% of drug funding comes from the government.
Yeah, I think we have to sorry to cut you short, but we've got to get on.
Just take a look at it.
Well,
thanks for that, Valerie.
If you send us a link of the person who wrote it, we'll get them on the show. Because I mean, trust.
Yeah, send that to me, actually, Valerie. I'll have a look at that.
We'll get them on the show because trust is the top of the priority of these events. So now we're going to move into the next.
We are the algorithm. So we're going to do two little rounds of 5 or 6 people in each room. If I suddenly move somebody for some reason, don't be alarmed. It's just because I'm evening out the rooms. I'm opening the rooms now, so if you just choose, or if you just accept the rooms you're in, and remember the time goes very quickly. So
how long do we have?
You're going to have about 10 minutes in the room.
Okay,
10,
so
12
it's
minutes.
Going to go 10 minutes. Yeah.
It's going to go 10 minutes, but you'll think it's like 2.
I'm a Time Lord.
Yeah, well, that's it. You are the Time Lord. But last time you're like, that was nowhere near 10 minutes. And it's like, yeah, it was. Okay.